So much for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me on, Julie. Rudy, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Congressman.
And we'll start with the president's comments last week on the Russia investigation. On Thursday, top security advisors warned about Russian meddling in the midterm elections. But later that evening, the president said this.
Now, we're being hindered by the Russian hoax. It's a hoax, okay? I'll tell you what, Russia's very unhappy that Trump won. That I can tell you.
All right, Congressman Burgess, let's begin with those comments. And also, are you concerned about Russia meddling in the elections? Do you think the Russians have meddled?
Well, first off, let me just say for people living in Denton and Tarrant counties, I think you can be very confident in the elections that are used here. Denton did go through some issues last year, not related to any foreign interference, but just technical problems with the electronic voting machines that were in use. They've gone through a big upgrade, a big expenditure, and as people who voted in the primary now are well aware, the difference now is that you have a printed ballot that is printed out when you get there. You mark it, it goes through the optical scanner, and it is retained. So that retention of a paper record, I think, is critical as far as people being confident in the certainty of their elections. That way, if you do have to do a recount, it is an actual recount, unlike those electronic recounts that had to happen in 2016 where there were some technical problems with the electronic voting machines in Denton County that did pose a problem. I think people can be very comfortable right now that the voting system is secure.
Do you think there was interference by the Russians in the election?
I don't think there was interference in electronic voting machines. I think, yeah, there is evidence that there was a good deal of interference as far as social media, but the fact of the matter remains the integrity of the system was not breached, and I think, if anything, it is stronger today than it was in 2016.
Are you concerned that the Russians or some other group will try to interfere again?
Well, I think it's a given that, look, our elections attract a lot of attention. Clearly they do within the country, but they attract a lot of attention across the world. And there are people who have interest in outcomes. I think the FBI, from everything that I've been told in open and classified settings, does a good job of watching that. It was disconcerting in 2016 to see the hack of the Democratic National Committee. It was disconcerting to see that they used systems that were vulnerable to that hacking. It was disconcerting that they did not listen to their counterparts at the FBI when they were advised of problems. So I think things are going to be moving in a much more secure direction in these next midterm elections.
I think what people are worried about is there is extremely strong evidence that a foreign government, specifically Russia, is using the ways we communicate with one another, Facebook in particular, to manipulate public opinion on the left and the right, to draw divisions among people that can become violent, that can become very difficult. And the President of the United States is saying, this is a hoax. So I guess, how difficult does it make the job for Congress or for the FBI to address these sorts of things if the president won't acknowledge that they're even extant?
Well, I don't think that the president discounted the fact that they even existed, but look, it's the obligation of each of us as a citizen to be able to make to do some critical thinking and evaluate information that comes our way. And there will be no shortage of information coming our way over these next 3 months. I guarantee you there's going to be a lot written and said about the midterm elections. It says it should be. It's going to be a defining election in this country, and people do need to be paying attention to it, but they also need to be paying attention to their news sources, whether they be their morning newspaper or the information they're receiving on Facebook.
Well, let me ask you this. Mark Zuckerberg was before Congress earlier this year, and talking about what Facebook has done and is doing. Are you satisfied that our biggest social media providers are doing enough, or does Congress need to get a little more aggressive in terms of looking at how people get their information?
Well, you do want to be careful about the First Amendment, because that is the key here, and people actually have the freedom of speech and the freedom to express themselves. One of the concerns I think you've heard about, some people are concerned that Facebook is maybe being now too aggressive in curtailing or restricting, that Twitter is being too restrictive in curtailing and restricting some accounts. Again, that's going to require constant monitoring and reevaluation. At the same time, it's, even your morning newspaper, and I will say this, this week I was I was somewhat encouraged by my morning newspaper, your newspaper, acknowledged that the strength of the economy was perhaps real and it was a good thing and it was helping people. And I thought, wow, that's some news that I didn't expect to read in my morning newspaper, but I'm grateful to read it. That's the power of a free press.
Major concern about tariffs, especially here in Texas. What should be done?
Well, do recognize that all the discussion around tariffs, that's not the end game. That's not the desire is to have tariffs on particular products. But the president is using that as one of the tools in the toolbox to bring people to the table and to renegotiate some of the trade agreements that I think he's correct in having identified them as having been a bit one-sided. And this should be no surprise. I mean, the president ran on this. It was not something that he obscured during the campaign and then suddenly brought forward afterwards. No, he was quite forthcoming. And in fact, if we recall the previous election when Barack Obama won, he was quite critical of NAFTA, but then nothing ever happened as far as any renegotiation. So this president has been very serious. He wants the American worker to be favored again. He wants scales to perhaps be tipped in favor of the American worker, and I support him on that.
Judge Brett Kavanaugh, do you think we'll see a vote on his nomination to the Supreme Court prior to the midterm elections?
Yes. And we should. He should be seated before their term begins the 1st of October, first Monday in October. That is really, that's not something. There's been a lot of obstruction of presidential appointees at the United States Senate. My feeling is that needs to end. It's time to get over that. But at the same time, let's have that hearing. Let's have that vote.
But in 2016, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell not put a vote for Merrick Garland on the floor. So what is the difference?
So take that up with Mitch McConnell next time he's on. But my feeling is that Judge Kavanaugh deserves a hearing, deserves a vote, and he deserves to be seated.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for being with us this